There we go. I would like to call to order the Chico Unified School Board of Trustees regular meeting for December 6, 2017. I also need to report any action that we took in closed session, and we did. And the district has entered into a tolling agreement with SCSH Chico LLC to toll any developer fee protest litigation claimed by SCSH Chico LLC, pending the outcome of the pending developer fee protest litigation claim brought by AmCal Chico LLC. And at the end of the meeting, if you could tell me what that meant, you could win a prize. Let's stand for the flag salute.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, and we need to move to item 4.1. It is our time of the year to elect officers for the school board. Anybody?
I think we start with president, correct?
Correct. 4.1.
I'm nominating Gary Lustow to a second term as president.
I'd like to second that nomination.
Okay, motion's been made in second. Any discussion?
Just a point of order, they don't need seconding.
Oh, they don't?
No.
I didn't know.
I would like to nominate Liz Griffin, and I do have her permission via international text to do that.
Eileen, if you could turn on your mic. We're having a hard time hearing you. Thank you.
I'm sorry. I was putting the name of Liz Griffin forward for president, and I do have Liz's permission via text. I know she's out of the country, but she said that she would agree to serve if elected.
Okay, so we see no others. So we're going to vote this one at a time then, or? Okay. So all those in favor of that Lustow guy?
Yes.
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 No. No, just kidding. Okay, passes 3-1. So then if that one passes.
Mr. President?
Yes.
I would like to nominate Liz Griffin for vice president, and again, with her permission.
Is your permission there? She said with your permission to be.
Liz
Oh,
Griffin.
Liz, I'm sorry.
Wake up or have to.
I gotta wake up here. This one's always a hard one for me.
Other woman.
Yes, I know. Okay, so Liz has been nominated. I would like to nominate Linda Hovey. Okay, seeing no others, we'll vote for Liz first in order of nomination.
I vote for Liz.
I vote for Liz.
So I vote for Linda. So it's tied.
Okay. Yeah, so vote again.
Sorry, everyone. So I would like to add a little clarification to this. I did talk with Liz yesterday, and she said that she was willing to serve, but she was very open to others, and really felt that because she wasn't here and wasn't a part of it, that if there was a position that nobody else wanted, she was happy to do that. So I'll throw that out there. She wasn't asking, I really want to do this. It was more, I will do this for the board if the position is needed.
Okay, so we'll do a
I'll interject that was the same message that Liz put forward to me in her text to me as well, was that she was making herself available if the board requested her service.
Okay, so then we're going to re-vote again. Yeah, we're going to vote in the same order?
Why
Okay,
don't you
same
start,
order.
why don't you start with Linda?
Start. You're saying the election right now is with Linda being the vice president?
Vote on that.
Okay, we're voting on that. We'll roll call it. Want to start with?
Robinson for Linda.
Kaiser for Linda.
Lustahl for Linda.
Yes, I accept.
Okay, now we move on to 4.3, which is elect the clerk.
I'll nominate myself for clerk.
Okay, let's call the vote for clerk, and again, let's roll call. It's simpler that way.
Huffy, aye.
Lustahl, aye.
Robinson, aye.
Kaiser, aye.
Okay, and now we need to appoint secretary to the board.
I'd like
Aye.
to nominate Erica.
Oh, is that, okay, okay, good.
Okay, let's call the vote for Erica, because there's nobody else that's going to be elected. Linda, can you call the vote? So, I'm calling roll call vote. Can you start it?
I sure can. Huffy, aye.
Lustahl, aye.
Kaiser, aye.
Robinson, aye.
She brought us cupcakes.
Yeah. Okay, now we move to item 4.5, set the date, time, and place of regular meetings. And I believe we had a list on that.
So in your board packet, you have a list of how it currently is set up for first and third Wednesdays. The first Wednesday of the month is typically our board workshop, and our third Wednesday of the month is the regular business meeting. In the past, we've been requested to provide an alternate where we looked at the second and fourth Wednesdays. So per that request in your packet, you also have a calendar that would look at what the second and fourth Wednesdays would look at as well. So.
Okay. Go ahead.
I believe that our legal requirement, since this will be an election year, is that in December, our meeting should be on December the 5th to meet the mandate of 15 days after election.
Okay. So then are we thinking as the first and third, is that what calendar?
Yes, I'm recommending that we
Right.
go with the first and third, but in December, there were 3 possible dates listed, but I believe only the 5th will meet the legal requirement of the 15 days.
Yeah.
That is correct.
Well, and this also has, there would be no workshop in December, yeah, which it says, no workshop. So, yeah, the 5th would be the regular. So we could, it's listed as December 5th regular board meeting for the first Wednesday. But the other ones are all first and thirds. So can we vote on that as it's listed here, or do we need to make that change?
You can vote on it as it is listed with the clarification. It does show that it is the regular board meeting, but just to make that clear that the December 5th would be the regular board meeting after the general election.
Very good.
Yeah, okay. So then another query is that we have the first August board meeting as the 15th, but school doesn't start until the 16th. That would appear to unfairly put everyone, to me, under great stress. So I would like to recommend the August 22nd date.
Agreed.
So that some of our administration still have their hair when we meet.
We would greatly appreciate that.
Okay, and that's stated. That is stated also.
Yeah, but it's also an or, so that's why I was.
Oh, you're right. It says or with 2 asterisks.
Yes. So we're going to go for the 22nd.
We highlight the 22nd with hopes that you would land there. But again,
Okay.
that is a board decision.
Okay, so any other discussion? We want to make a motion on these changes?
I move the adoption of the calendar for 2018 the first and third Wednesday of the month, with the two qualifiers that the first meeting in August will be the fourth Wednesday, August 22nd, and in December, in order to meet our legal obligations, it will be December the 5th.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, we have a motion and we have a second with it. Do we have any discussion?
Nope.
Seeing none, do we have any discussion from the audience? Everybody's fine with our dates, it looks like. Okay, so all those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Passes 4-0. Okay, and I think that ends our, let's see, 4.6, agenda layout. I gotta go back.
So attached, you have our agenda layouts that we have used for the past several years for both the regular board meetings and for the board workshops. Now would be the time if you would like to make any changes to the format of the agenda to do so. If not, we can continue with the format as it's presented.
I move that we continue with the format that we've been using.
I don't see need for any change. I will second.
Okay, motion's been made and we have a second. Do we have any other discussion? Seeing none, any from the audience? I see none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Passes 4-0. Okay, we now move on to student report.
So this is always the fun part of our agenda, and you actually get to see the fruit of all the labor. So I would like to introduce Miss Malay Benz. She is the principal of Sierra View Elementary School, and I do believe we are going to hear some music tonight.
We have Mrs. Glick's third grade class here tonight to play some ukuleles for you, as you can probably see. Just a quick backstory. About a year ago, our tech aide entered a contest on Facebook for some ukuleles, and she won a class set for us for free. And they happened to ship them in Sierra View Blue. What a really cool thing. Mrs. Glick has a passion for music. She sings with a women's group in town, and she shares her passion for music with her students. A couple years ago, there was a mom who came and told me that her son was having the very best year he'd ever had in school. He came home from school every day and said, "Mom, I'm so happy I got to sing today." So I'm very happy to share Mrs. Glick and her class with you.
I think they're almost ready for Hawaii, right?
Well, a huge thank you to Mrs. Glick and her students. That was wonderful. Thank you for coming here tonight. And we won't make you stay. We know you have homework and things to get back to. So if you want to stay, you're more than welcome to. But if you are ready to go home, you can do that as well. And again, huge hand for Mrs. Glick and her students. So we are going to move right on into the superintendent's report, and we have some more student recognition to do. And I would like to invite Mr. John Carver, who is our Director of Maintenance Operation in Transportation, up to the podium.
Good evening. So something very exciting has happened in the last couple of months in my department. Not only did the board approve the funding for our new buses, but I was invited back east where they make the buses to have a tour of the facility. One day after I came back to Chico, I was contacted by Bluebird Industries, and they wanted to do a story on Chico and to put one of our schools and our bus on the cover. So with that said, I got a hold of the admin here at Marsh Junior, and we got 9 students to participate. And I promised these students that I would give them 2 copies of the cover. So Jessica's going to ask them to come up, and I will give them their copies.
All right. All right. So we have Matt and Cipriani Chim. Are they here tonight?
And Mr. Carver, you're going to have them all sign one, so we have a signed one, right? All right.
All right. We also have Mackenzie Gorman. Tyree Royston. I don't believe she's here tonight, so I can make sure she gets that. Colton Betancourt. Daya Patel. All right, Neil Bahaja? Did I say it right, Neil? Is he here? No? And then Brian Maximilian.
Also, I've asked this young group to hang out just for a minute. We have something special to do for Mr. Bultema. We'd like to sing him happy birthday. 1, 2, 3. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Kevin. Happy birthday to you. I heard he's only 29 this year. And just one more if I can. One of the things that I adopted this new school year was we make good things happen for other people. And I would like to present to the first recipient of the Maintenance Operations and Transportation Certificate of Recognition to the Chico Unified School Board. So presented to Eileen Robinson in recognition of your efforts to make good things happen for other people. Presented the 6th day of December 2017. Chico Unified School District Maintenance Operations and Transportation. That's all I got.
And again, a huge thank you to Mr. Carver and our transportation department for that gorgeous new bus. It's going to be great for our kids, so thank you for doing that. So now I'm going to move into our recognition for classified staff, and I'd like to invite Mike Allen, principal at Chapman Elementary, to recognize our first recipient, Mr. Allen.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. So I nominated Mario Lemos, our custodian, for the Superintendent's Award, not because he's an exceptional custodian, which he is. You can ask anybody who he's ever worked with how well he does his job. That's not why I nominated him. The reason why I nominated Mario is because he does his job with such passion, positivity, and the biggest thing is that he builds relationships with students and with staff. So, hands down, I'm very happy to present Mario with the Superintendent's Award for all that he does for Chapman.
Yep, that was going to be my comment, Super Mario. Where is your cape? Your socks that don't match.
Troll leg, right?
The cape's in my car. I bring it to work every day.
I know you do.
Yes, and if you were able to look into my closet, it looks like a box of Skittles.
Yeah.
I find that you can walk into a room and make everybody smile without saying a word simply by the way you're dressed. And I truly try to make everybody, everywhere I go, smile. And if you don't know me, you will. I thank you. Thank you so very much. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you, Mario. And now I'd like to invite Julie Kissel to present another classified award.
Thank you. Tonight, I nominated Casey Tyner from our facilities department. You don't have to stand up yet. I asked Maria Campos and Lelania to come up and help me talk about Casey. So I'm going to have Maria come up and start. Lelania, come up too. So you ready?
Casey. Excuse me, I had to write it down because I'm going to choke up and maybe cry a little bit. Casey, your approach to getting things done the way they should be is unbeatable. Much of our team's success is due to your skill and hard work. We all really appreciate all your hard work and everything you have done openly and behind the scenes to make our department successful. You are not just my coworker, you're one of my best friends. I appreciate your hard work, time, and support. We're so lucky to have you.
Good
All right, well, I wanted to borrow something from Mrs. Glick's class, which was that at Sierra View, every person is important, and I believe that, and Casey is a very important part of our team. And when I was interviewing for Chico Unified, she was on the panel, and she was kind of my rock because I was so nervous and anxious, and she kind of had this warm smile that I kind of kept coming back to make me comfortable and keep answering my questions and kind of almost like encouraging me, you got it, go on, you got it. And she's still that same person. And I say, Casey, if you were a car, you'd be a Lexus. You're smart and elegant. And if you were medical equipment, you'd be a crutch. You are always there when we need you, and we really, really appreciate everything you do for us. Thank you.
So a couple more quick things. Casey is a devoted wife and mother. She's the parent of 2 Chico Unified students. at Sierra View, which is fitting tonight that they're here playing ukulele for us. And one son is now at Chico High School. He's a junior, and the other is graduated and at Chico State. She's very devoted to her family, and she's devoted to her family at work as well. We enjoy working with you. We're so lucky to have you. There's so many words I could use to describe you. Organized, just wonderful, and we really, really appreciate you. Thank you very much. Going to get a picture, everybody? Department?
Oh, beautiful. Thank you,
Can we get in the middle? Kelly?
Here we go. Go. Sean?
Wide lens, wide lens.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
So well deserved. You're so beautiful. That's awesome. And then last but not least, I want to thank Jamie Azevedo. Jamie has been doing our tech work at the board meetings for the last 6 months and really kind of helped us with this transition to a new location. So Jamie, if you can wave. Thank you, Jamie. Jamie is moving on to Nevada City. He's leaving us, but I think he gets to go home. So we're happy for you, and thanks for the time you spent with us. Right, Jamie. And that concludes the superintendent's report. I'll turn it back over to you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move to number 7, announcements. Do we have any announcements? Kathy?
So 4 of us were at CSBA in San Diego, working very hard, and I think that we all came back with some interesting insights. And then Gary Lustal, the chair, and I are going to the STEAM conference in San Francisco. So we hope to bring back between the two some interesting tidbits to start 2018.
Very good. Any others? Okay, we'll move now from items from the floor. If there anyone would like to speak on something that is not on the agenda, come forward, state your name, and
We can't hear you.
I'm sorry.
yeah.
Thank you.
My name is Tom Hicks. I'm the director of Wildflower Open Classroom Charter School here in Chico, and I am here tonight to present the charter renewal documents on behalf of our school. So we look forward to working with you guys through this process, and thanks for your consideration. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I take, okay. Is he bringing that to us, or are you, oh, you got it, okay. Any other items from the floor? Okay. Now we will move to the negotiations update.
Okay. So we met on November 30th with CUTA, and we discussed a number of issues with good, constructive, positive outcomes. We're making progress on wages and benefits. As I mentioned before, we're working on a 3-year wages agreement, and we continue to make progress in there. We also talked about all-day kindergarten, elementary stipends, and prep time issues with non-rostered teachers. So we came to some, we created some contract language on some of those issues and continue to work on the others. So good progress, and we're going to meet again on December 12th, no, 14th. I don't know if you want to add anything, Kevin, to that?
No, that covers it.
And then we will be meeting with CSEA. We have not met since the last board meeting, but we'll be meeting with them on December 12th.
Okay, thank you very much. We will now move to the consent calendar. Do we have anybody with an item they would want to pull?
No, I was just going to move approval of the consent calendars since we hadn't had anybody pull anything.
Okay, motion's been made and second. Do we have any other discussion? I see none. Any discussion from the audience? I see none. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Passes 4-0. Okay, let's flip over. Now we will move to Mr. Bohannon, 11.1.1. Pivot Charter, North Valley.
Good evening. So as the board is fully aware, we received a charter petition for Pivot Charter School North Valley 2, and our PowerPoint's not, there it goes. At the September 20th board meeting, we then had a public hearing at the regularly scheduled October board meeting. We were originally scheduled to come to the board for a decision at the November regularly scheduled meeting, but on request from Pivot, we extended that to tonight's meeting, which still fits us into the 90-day window that is required by Ed Code. I just want to point out that this charter is a little bit different because it's, on technicality, it is considered a new charter petition, but it is certainly not a new charter school. So that makes it a little different in how we look at it because there's a lot of data that goes along with a school that's been around for about 7 years. Because of that, Tim Karras is our data guy, is going to help with this presentation to review some data. I did want to thank our entire charter committee and Tim and his data team for doing a whole lot of work to look at a whole lot of different pieces of data over the last month or so. Additionally, we have John Ye here, who represents our district in all charter matters and does review every charter petition that is submitted to our district. So Pivot Charter Schools, I just went through, they have submitted charter schools, charter petitions now in 4 different districts. One in North Bay, which is currently authorized by Oak Grove, much like the one that is located in Chico is currently authorized by Golden Feather. One in San Diego that was authorized by the Mountain Empire, one in Riverside, and then one in North Valley, which is us. We are the last of those petitions to come to the board for a decision at this point, to the district board. And just so you know, their petition was denied in Newview, Corona Norco, and Santa Rosa City Schools, also denied by the Riverside County Office of Education. But it was approved in San Marcos Unified down near San Diego for a 4-year term with conditions. I did inquire with San Marcos as to what those conditions were, and they just told me that they're going to work on an MOU with Pivot as it relates to the findings that their charter team came up with, which frankly are pretty similar to what our team came up with and what all the other districts have arrived at. So I want to make sure I don't usurp into somebody else's slide here. I got to keep track of where I am. This is actually not my slide. So I'm going to hand it over to Mr. Ye now, and he's going to go over some legalities of what got us here, and then legalities as it relates to charter petition review in particular.
Thank you, Mr. Bohannon. Good evening, members of the board. John Ye from Burke, Williamson, Sorensen. I want to first start by giving some context as to how this petition came to you and some background on Pivot's history within Chico. So as Mr. Bohannon mentioned, Pivot obtained a charter from the Golden Feather District and has actually operated a resource center. It's an online non-classroom based program, but has been operating a resource center in Chico since approximately 2009. Last year, the California Court of Appeal handed down a decision by the name of Anderson Union High School District versus Shasta Secondary Homeschool, and the ruling from that decision was that for non-classroom based charters, resource centers that were located outside the geographic boundaries of their authorizer were prohibited, were in violation of the education code. And so the resource center operated by Pivot in Chico was in violation of the California Education Code because it was outside the boundaries of its authorizer, the Golden Feather School District. So Pivot, like many other charter schools in a similar situation, applied to the State Board of Education for a waiver and obtained, along with the other Pivot charter schools, a waiver to continue operating their resource centers through the end of the 2017-2018 school year, the current school year, during which time the charter schools would apply to the school districts in which the resource centers were located to achieve compliance with the rule after the Anderson Court ruling. So I know the district oversees a number of charters and the board has considered a number of petitions. I'll go through a brief summary of the major parts of the education code that talk about the process and criteria for granting a charter petition. So the Charter Schools Act starts with the proclamation that charter schools are intended to be an integral part of the California educational system and that establishment of charter schools should be encouraged. And the governing board of a school district shall grant a charter for the operation of a school if it's satisfied that granting the charter is consistent with sound educational practice. So that is the underlying principle. Beyond that, and with a little more detail, if a governing board decides not to grant a petition, it must do so under certain grounds that are listed in the Education Code, and those are listed on the slide that's before you. The three primary grounds that are most often invoked are the first, second, and fifth, and I'll walk through those. The first ground would be that the charter petition contains an unsound educational program. The second ground is that the petitioners are demonstrably unlikely to successfully implement the program set forth in the petition. And the third most frequently invoked ground is that the petition lacks reasonably comprehensive descriptions of the 15 required charter elements required by the Education Code. The other three grounds are mainly technical, so we're going to focus on the three grounds that I just walked through. Procedurally, the board has a choice, basically two choices, two options. One is to grant the petition or to deny the petition. The Education Code requires that if the board denies a petition, it must adopt written findings in support of the denial, and those written findings must align with the grounds for denial as well as the requirements of the Education Code, including the required 15 elements, which are contained on the next two slides. I won't read through the entire list since you have them in the staff's evaluation, but the 15 elements really align with every aspect of operation involved in the educational program, and educational process, from the educational program, people outcomes, employee issues, labor issues, student discipline, governance issues, and such. So those are the 15 elements on these two slides. And so the charter review team at Chico Unified spent a significant amount of time reviewing the petition against the criteria set forth in the Education Code, and John Bohannon will give a summary of the primary findings.
So, if the microphone will stay up. So after thorough review and statistical analysis, the entire charter committee staff has significant concerns regarding Pivot North Valley, specifically related to substandard of student performance, high student attrition, lack of rigor in the educational program as described in the petition, lack of access to the governing board, and defects in employee qualifications, admissions, preference, stirs, and suspension, expulsion within the elements that John just delineated must be outlined in the petition. So, in a summary of that, the unsound educational program, we're concerned about not only the CASP scores, which is your SBAC testing, but we're also concerned, highly concerned, about the accrual of credits that students earn while they are enrolled at Pivot or don't, in many cases, appear not to obtain while they're enrolled in Pivot. We're highly concerned that this puts the students at a severe disadvantage of even graduating high school, let alone moving on to other educational opportunities after high school. So I'm going to hand this over to Tim Karras now, who's going to review some of that data that brought us to these concerns.
Good evening. Before we dig into student achievement data or credit accrual data, which will be the focus of our data presentation tonight, I wanted to share, just to add context to this conversation, demographics for Pivot North Valley as compared to our Chico Unified Secondary Schools. So I'll give you a second to take a look at that. One thing that we see when we look at these demographics is that Pivot, while it does have 11th graders, is closest probably to Bidwell Junior High or Chico Junior High. The exceptions being is that both CUSD schools have much higher EL populations, but we can see the unduplicated count of students falling into these subgroups is very similar to those two sites. Okay, the first data set I'm going to go over is related to credit accrual. John Bohannon was able to obtain credit data by semester from Pivot, and we were able to access our credit data on credit accrual through our student information system. So what you see here is a very simple table that indicates the percentage of students earning 29 or less credits per semester at Pivot, CUSD as a whole, and then each of our secondary schools. So that's the red column, and then the green column is 30 or more credits per semester. In Chico Unified, 30 credits per semester is considered on track to graduate.
And I just wanted to add that 30 credits is not necessarily the expectation at Pivot for them to graduate, because the Chico Unified 4-year total is 235 credits to graduate, and at Pivot it's 210. But even at that expectation, then we would expect students at Pivot, if they were going to stay on track to earn graduation, would be earning about 26.5 credits per semester. And we can see that, and look, if we dig down deeper in the data, you can see that the majority of those students are not also earning even the 26 they would need to be on pace at Pivot.
And I do want to use this slide to note that we are including, in many cases in our data sets, alternative schools in Chico. So we have Fairview, Continuation, AFC, Cal, and Oakdale also included. Okay. Before I leave this slide, is there any questions?
Tim, is there a corresponding page number of your report for your graphs, or is there a correlation?
In the report?
Yeah. Because I don't remember seeing.
It was sent by email.
I don't remember seeing those statistics.
I'm sorry, are you looking for a correlation to the number of kids that are, their graduation percentages?
The credit accrual. I've been through this a couple of times, and I didn't remember seeing that data set.
I think there's some references to kids not being on track, but I don't think they were specific to this data set. Because we were still trying to accrue it. Really, we didn't get all the data tabulated to make sure we had a true comparison until
so it's not that
frankly yesterday.
So I didn't miss something. Okay, thank you.
This is part of our concern about the educational program being unsound.
No, I had gathered that there was a problem, and I was waiting for a continuing analysis to come forward, and so I'm glad that it finally came together. But I thought maybe I had missed.
No, it was just a challenge for us to get those averages for about 5,000 kids, so it took a while going through a lot of data sets to get to this point. Again, our data team did a marvelous job. It just took some time.
Okay, so moving on to Smarter Balanced Assessment results. Before we dig into those results, we just wanted to provide you with a graphic showing how many students are tested and are included in the charts that you're about to see. Please note that one new data point that we've added since the report is the percent tested. Okay.
Tim, I'm going to stop you again because I know, John, I did send a question through on the very first page of the report that we got under number of students enrolled versus number of students tested. My concern was particularly in the 11th grade, where it said 83 11th graders enrolled and only 49 tested. Did you uncover any reason why there were so few tested? I know, you know, it's not Nickleby anymore and you don't have to reach the 95%, but...
We're still required to meet the 95%, but I'm going to let John answer that.
So yeah, the requirement is still that you test 95% of your students. What we don't know now with the change from No Child Left Behind is what is the consequence if you don't meet that, because the testing is so new. And we don't have information from, we would have to reach out to Pivot to find out why their percentages of testing are where they are. We don't currently have that information. But we could, I'm sure we could probably get it, but it would need to be provided by Pivot because for us it would just be anecdotal. For them, hopefully they have more explanations as to why they're far below the 95%.
But Ms. Robinson, you're asking that question is the reason that we did put this data together. So hopefully it does address the question that you had.
Right. All the data that we're looking at tonight comes from DataQuest, which is the state public website for accessing smarter balance scores. Okay, so looking at English language arts, we're going to look at grade level by grade level here. So the bar in red is Pivot North Valley. We do include some of the other Pivot schools towards the bottom, and there's the blue and green that you see. When you see a blank in the table below the bar graph, what that means is the school did not have enough students tested to enable the state to report a subgroup out publicly. So what we see here is 8th grade ELA is a real positive area for Pivot. The other areas that we see, 7th grade ELA, 7th grade math, and 8th grade math are significantly below many Chico Unified schools. Is there any questions about this one?
No, that graph I saw.
When we pull out 11th graders, we see Pivot in both this graph shows both ELA and math. We see Pivot lower than both of our comprehensive high schools. Any questions? And a specific area of concern for the charter committee is the math achievement scores as measured by Smarter Balanced. And we can see Pivot North Valley, it's the fourth one in from the right-hand side. We see that significantly lower than our Chico Unified secondary schools, and we see a downward trend. So that's a specific area of concern for us. And just to be clear, this chart is showing students that meet or exceed standard on the Smarter Balance test. Any questions? Okay, the next data that we're going to look at is related to attrition.
So the petition that was turned in by Pivot indicated this data that you see on here as new or leaving students from year to year. After this was released in our findings, I did have a conversation with Pivot's executive director, Jana Gaskell, about they were saying that the attrition looked really large because they had so many new students in 16, 17, so it wasn't really attrition, it was more gaining new students. So we had a conversation of, well, share with me what you think your attrition data really is, because we're really taking it from them, because we wouldn't have a way of tabulating that. So she did send us an update, I think it was yesterday, maybe it was Monday. She did send us an update that showed a different data set, but it still didn't align to what we would consider attrition, because it was not take into account kids that might have left at semester at the end of a school year. We believe that's still attrition unless it's during a natural movement grade level. So example, if they finish 8th grade and then they want to go to a different school for high school, that would be natural. But if they finish 9th grade and then want to go to another school, that would be attrition, in our opinion. So we haven't got a data set yet outside of this data set that matches what our data set is for Chico Unified, which is going to be the next slide. So that's where we are, but we still think attrition is an issue and students moving in and out is an issue. So we want to make sure we still talk about it as part of our presentation.
Acknowledging we're not comparing like data sets. On this slide, it will display the percentages of students who leave a school, who left at the end of the 15-16 school year and did not return to Chico Unified for the 16-17 school year. So students that we lost out of our district. Any questions about this?
Yeah, I have a question. So if I'm looking at that right, in 10th grade, AFC was 42%. Am I reading that right?
Yes.
Gary, I do want to point out that in most cases, when you look at Cal and AFC, when you're talking about 25 to 42%, that's usually between 1 and 3 students, because those are very small data sets. So I know, for example, for a fact at Cal, when it said grade 7, 20% of them left, that was 1 out of 5 kids. So it wasn't, it's really, just when you look at the real numbers, we're talking about 1 kid. So those numbers are very small at like Cal and AFC.
Maybe we should put those in real numbers.
Put the actual numbers?
Yeah.
I can send those to you. I don't have them off the top.
No, I don't.
Any further questions?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask the question. It seems to me that Pivot's whole mission is to bring children in and then move them back out. And so the attrition rate would be a natural part of that mission. Why is it of such concern?
So the concern is that they're in most cases, as you saw with their credit recovery, their credit retention, they're coming back more credit deficient than they did when they left, and at which case those kids are in a worse situation as far as earning high school graduation. And we find that troubling with so many kids moving. We also have seen a trend in talking to our alt-ed program where they may leave Pivot, and this might be by no fault of Pivot, but they may leave Pivot and we wouldn't know that, and then they don't come back to re-enroll at one of our programs for 3-4 weeks. And so now they're even further behind. So attrition in those areas is a big concern. It's great that we want to hopefully turn kids around and send them back, but we want to send them back successful, and in most cases what we're seeing, they're coming back more credit deficient than they were when they left.
Excuse me, Mr. President. May I speak? I'm sorry, Gary. I was at a school office just recently, and a Pivot student was trying to enroll and was working to become eligible for sports, and the assistant principal was working with the student and the registrar, and the young man learned that he hadn't earned any credits while at Pivot, and so was, like you said, it was so far behind coming back that he'd become ineligible for sports. Do we not counsel, well, I guess that would be a question we'd ask of Pivot, why they would not counsel their students to not leave, in the middle of a grading period. Okay, that's a question I'll ask later.
Yeah, I think some of that is not always in control of the school, but I do think that The issue is how were they not accruing credits while they were there? And I think we're done with the data, correct? So I think we're going to hand this back over to Mr. Ye to talk about other findings within the 15 elements inside the petition.
The team focused on both the school's performance data and its attrition data, and rightfully so, because the earmarks of academic performance are the most important. I am going to give an executive summary of the other findings, since there are 15 required elements. These are discussed in much more detail in the report, so I will give a brief summary of the major significant findings. Under the educational program, the petition doesn't address how, for an online program, if pupils or families are unable to afford either a computer or online broadband service within their household, the petition doesn't address how that those student needs would be met. Education Code 49011 does require that supplies, materials, and equipment needed to participate in educational activities shall be provided to pupils free of charge. And the petition did not provide a reasonably comprehensive description of how it would meet the needs of those families. The petition failed to specify pupil growth goals by pupil subgroups, as is required by the Education Code. The review team had concerns about the charter school's governance structure. The Roads Board, a nonprofit public benefit corporation, operates at any time 3 to 4 charter schools, all spread throughout the state. According to the petition and the bylaws, the location of the meetings vary according to the location of the resource centers. So at any given meeting, the board could be meeting up in Santa Rosa or down in Southern California, and that creates a real access issue for parents as well. Also, the Brown Act requires that a board meet within the geographic boundaries, within its geographic boundaries, and the Anderson case establishes that a charter school's geographic boundaries are the boundaries of its authorizer as well. So the conclusion was that that portion of the petition violated the Brown Act.
John, thank you. On page 24 of the charter's response to our findings, it says that because the Brown Act, which is found in the government code, does not apply to charter schools, roads, is not required. How would they not be covered by the Brown Act? I mean, I've worked with other charters and have done trainings on the Brown Act, and we denied a charter a few years back because of Brown Act violations. How do they get an exemption from complying with the Brown Act?
I found that statement to be somewhat puzzling. My experience is the same, where when it comes to the agendizing requirements and the conduct of the meetings, by and large, the great majority of the charter schools recognize that they must comply with the Brown Act. The Brown Act, however, contains, as you know, more requirements above and beyond agendizing and the conduct of meetings, and one of them is the location requirement.
Right.
And charters contend, I will tell you that charter schools contend that they don't have geographical boundaries because students can enroll, as you know, from anywhere in the state. They're not limited in the sense that traditional school districts are to students attending who live within the geographic boundaries of the district. However, for the purposes of the Brown Act, the Anderson case came down and actually established that the boundaries for the purposes of locating a resource center and locating the charter school is or are the boundaries of the authorizing district. And we believe that the best interpretation of the Brown Act is that the geographic boundaries of the charter school is the geographic boundaries of the authorizer. That makes sense from a public access point of view if I need to address the board. And I'm a parent here in Butte County, and the board that month is meeting down in San Marcos or Corona Norco, that's an access issue. Not everyone can afford to get down there. So the charter review team also had concerns in the area of the retirement system, STRS, that the charter school used the wrong eligibility threshold. The review team found disparities between the petition and the student handbook as to the grounds for discipline, and that creates a potential due process issue of informing students.
I'm sorry, John, your little insert there is blocking our ability to read that. You could kill it or move it.
There you go. Yes. Okay. Is there a previous? Go back. Oh, there we go. Okay, so that was the slide we just finished, and this was the slide that we're currently covering. So I'll just round out the list of findings outside the academic program, academic performance. The Education Code and regulations require a petition to list employee qualifications, and this section of the petition listed employee duties, but not qualifications. The review team thought that the admissions procedure in the petition was not reasonably comprehensive, since it did not explain how it would implement the statutorily required preferences for in-district students and returning students. And finally, there was a concern that the petition provided a lacked a description of social-emotional supports for a student population that the petition identified as likely to be requiring additional support in that area. So I'm going to hand it over to John Bohannon to give a final overview.
So that's going to happen every time, isn't it? So in conclusion for our report here, the Charter Committee review team for Chico Unified believes that the petition fails to contain a reasonably comprehensive description of all 15 elements. In fact, 10 of the 15 required elements have been found deficient within the petition. We also believe, the data shows that the petition fails to contain a sound education program, and based on credit retention, it would appear that the petitioners are demonstrably unlikely to successfully implement a program that's in the petition. So those are all 3 reasons that a board could vote to deny a charter petition. I'm actually going to hand this back over to Mr. Gay, because he's going to talk about the 2 options that were presented to this board in the petition and what they each mean and how it works.
The board packet did include documentation for 2 possible outcomes that staff is presenting to the board. Option A is for the board to deny the petition, and we would recommend that if a motion is made, the motion include, in addition to denial of the petition, adoption of the staff report, the PowerPoint, and there's a 3rd document that I will mention soon, adopting those 3 documents as the written support, the written findings in support of the decision. And the grounds would be that the petition contained an unsound educational program. Petitioners are demonstrably unlikely to successfully implement the program set forth in the petition, and that the petition fails to contain a reasonably comprehensive description of the 15 required charter elements under the Education Code. Option B involves granting the petition with a number of very specific conditions that are enumerated within the resolution. The charter would be granted for a 2-year term starting July 1, 2018. The charter school would only offer and operate grades 6 through 12. The charter school would maintain an attrition rate in its student enrollment of no more than 25%. And there's actually a typographical error in the resolution that was posted. It said no less than, so that would be changed to no more than. The charter school must show growth overall and in all subgroups in English language arts and math. using the 17-18 school year for the current Pivot Resource Center as a benchmark year. And the percentage of charter school high school students carrying no less than 30 units a semester would have to be consistent with the percentage attained by students at Chico Unified Schools as well. So there's another procedural requirement that in the event that the district and the board deem that the charter school has failed to meet any of the conditions, the charter school would agree to surrender the charter. If the charter school refused to surrender the charter, it would waive all the procedural requirements involved in the revocation process and would agree to that the board could summarily revoke the charter without the procedures set forth in the education code and the accompanying regulations. And finally, the charter school would be required to enter into a memorandum of understanding or an MOU containing the above terms following 30 days following board action. Otherwise, the action that granted the petition would be rescinded. So I will, that concludes the staff presentation. I will hand it back to President Lustal. Thank you.
John, you said there would be 3 components that option A would include: the staff report, the PowerPoint. What was the third one?
Yes, thank you for reminding me. So one other element that took place very recently is that Pivot submitted a written response to the staff's findings, and the Superintendent Staley received that yesterday. So staff evaluated that and created a document. We have copies of that available for the board and the public. So the staff evaluated each and every one of Pivot's responses. The conclusion is that the staff report and the conclusions stated in the staff report stand. We've considered all of Pivot's responses. Essentially, we considered those arguments, but nothing that rebutted the findings that were made by staff. And so the third document would be the one that Mr. Bohannon is handing out. It's a side-by-side chart showing the findings, Pivot's response, and the evaluation of the response by the review team.
Thank you, Mr. President. A number of discussions that I've had with staff, both classified and certificated, involving Pivot schools. I was wondering if Mr. Moretti has had any, if I could ask, sir, any discussion, any feedback, any dialogue with Chico Unified School District certificated staff that have had to respond to Pivot students returning to CUSD?
I have not had those conversations with my members about Pivot students. No.
You don't have any feedback that you can?
I have.
You have feedback?
I have feedback, but not based on conversations with my members.
I'd like to hear what you have to say, if that's appropriate.
I'm not sure at this time. I think right when we open up for any other. As soon as I don't know if Mr. Bohannon is done. Are we done now with your section? Okay, so then we'll make sure that Mr. Moretti has time to speak.
I had a couple more questions.
Yeah, we're available for questions, but our presentation is completed.
Okay, so let's go with question.
First,
Dr. Kaiser?
Should we make a motion and then let you respond to questions, or do you want to answer questions before there's a motion made?
I think that would be up to the board. Yeah. I'm comfortable either way.
Yeah, I mean, let's go with some questions. We're probably going to do both. That's probably what's going to happen. So we'll start. Linda, you say you have a question? Go ahead.
I'd actually like to ask Pivot a question. The attrition issue. Our district, after your response to this concern, high attrition is a symptom of students' personal struggles, and the response from the district team says the petition does not adequately address a plan to increase student retention. Do you have some other plan in mind to implement to try and address this concern?
I think the biggest challenge that we see that we actually agree with CSUD staff on
on attrition is when students leave mid-semester. We can beg, plead, and counsel them not to leave when they haven't finished 50% of a semester's worth of work to get any credits, because we don't, unlike some traditional continuation schools, we don't give piecemeal credits. It's either you finish and accomplish and master half of the course of a semester's worth of course to get 2.5 or 5.0, nothing in between, nothing less. So we do counsel them frequently. We certainly, as per my response, would be open to coming up with something that you will be comfortable with to even up our amount of communication with our students when they want to leave mid-semester, including going back to the school that's going to receive them and say, look, before you withdraw and maybe lose all of this work that you've just put in, talk to the school that you're trying to go to first, and then withdraw. But of course, we can't make them do that. There's, it's illegal to make them do that. But we do already meet with them, counsel them. I mean, our teachers talk to their parents and them at least 3-4 times a week, if not daily, especially when they say they're going to leave.
Thank you.
So, and our attrition, just to dovetail off of that, if you're looking just at attrition from the end of a school year into the next school year, this year we had a 63% retention rate, so it would be a 37% attrition rate. But again, that's our goal, and I'm not trying to sugarcoat it or come up with excuses. We say very clear in our petition, a comprehensive high school has a lot of cool things to offer high school students. They have dances and they have social things and they have, more than we do. They have large groups of kids. They have labs on site that we don't have. We say very clearly our mission is to say, come on, kiddo, you were failing a bunch of classes. You've shut down on academics. Let us try to get you back on track, and then you can go back. And they want to go back and prove themselves a lot of time. So that's part of who we are. I'm actually proud of that 63% retention rate. It keeps going up every year, but that's part of what we're trying to do. I'm not going to apologize for that. It's who we are, and it's not an excuse.
Thank you. I had a couple of questions. In reading through, and I'm putting, my evaluation hat on the length of time that you've been functioning, and my concern was especially the math scores, but basically the test scores overall. And one of the things in your response to our concerns about the ongoing scoring and student evaluation was that you had purchased the iReady and the IOS. Something, but
yeah, IOS.
And you said that they had just now become available, but iReady has been out there for years. So I was wondering why you hadn't gone after something like iReady years ago.
iReady actually just got aligned to the SBAC last year. And we were so void of a system of assessments that actually had, we got rid of the API 3 years ago. We just started implementing the brand new system. It was optional the first year, it was trial the second, and so iReady actually, per their webpage, they say they just got aligned to the SBAC test scores last year. We demoed several over the last couple of years while there was a gap in that assessments, and that is one of the best ones. That's what, when the company came and spoke to us and gave us their pitch, we said, how truly aligned are you, and how much of an indicator, because that's what we were looking for, was an indicator of how well the kids were going to do, and how much will your instructional, because we bought the instructional component too, how much of that will really prep the kids to know what's being tested on the SBAC, because we know that's important. It is important. We're also focusing on a lot of other aspects of a kid's educational well-being, but the SBACs and mastering the standards, and it wasn't completely aligned until very recently. We did use other things. We've used Study Island in the past. We've tried several other things, so it's not that we didn't try things in the past, but clearly it didn't work as well as we needed and wanted it to. I don't want to hang our hat on just one software program or one instructional program, but we think it will do well. The other thing we need to look at, and again, I'm not trying to make up excuses, but we have so few kids who test. And actually, just to correct you, Ms. Robinson, I don't know where that number came from of 85. In April, when testing happened, we had 19 11th graders. I'm not sure where 85 came from. We just actually looked it up in CalPads while we were sitting here. So
It was all the pivots.
Oh, all the pivots. Okay, gotcha. Thank you. Wasn't quite sure, and I didn't know where that was coming from. So we had 19 11th graders. And again, so that's, and then who actually tests the next year is completely different with the growth. But we are trying. We hope iReady will help us because of them being fully aligned now. Better than Study Island or anything else we've tried.
Any others? Thank you. Okay, so we can ask questions of any other group. We can make a motion. Dr. Kaiser?
I make a motion to adopt option A, which is the resolutions and findings on option A, to deny the Pivot Charter North Valley 2 petition, including the adoption of the staff report, the PowerPoint, Pivot's written response to our committee, and their response back.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, so we have a motion that is made, and we also have a second. Do we have any discussion
I would like
here?
to speak to my motion, please.
Go ahead.
So I appreciate data. I have a great deal of comfort with mathematics, and I reviewed all of this data. And when such a significant number of people don't even take the test, one of the concerns is this a version of the Volkswagen aspect where, quote unquote, they literally falsified test results? Well, you can't do that, but you cannot take the test. The second aspect is that there was a great deal of variance in what grades were supposedly being reached by Pivot Second, and I understand that there has been a correction to that to only do 6th through 12th. My last part is, and I've had parents reach out to me via email about how impactful being at Pivot was for their child. I too had a granddaughter that I got access to very late. She had had extremely traumatic teen years. She had been in 6 different schools, and she was, quote unquote, a junior. But I took her to Fairview, and not only did she graduate on time, but she got an academic scholarship. The issue of how to reach out to students who are struggling is a very painful issue for any parent or grandparent, since I got legal authority over her. But I think that a school has to be responsible for the results. Had Fairview become school number 7 with no results, I don't know what would have happened to her. So you have students who are struggling in a traditional environment, but we have other environments, and the lack of those students returning to a district school here or even in another district and graduating on time is extremely compelling to me to say no. Thank you.
Mr. Bohannon?
Yeah, I just wanted to point out that we have a first and a second, but we have not yet taken public comment.
We will take public comment. We'll first, any discussion from us, and then I will go to the public.
Okay, thanks.
So do we have other discussion?
I have just other things that I found in the documents, because Pivot, I did read all the documents. There was a letter from one of your board members that indicated that you were willing to pay a 3% fee to the district for your oversight costs, which is, you know, your obligation is 1%, not 3%. And one of the things we were warned about, we just happened to be in Southern California at a California School Boards Association meeting, was we went to charter school authorization workshops. And one of our cautions was, make sure you don't get offered a 3% when you're not eligible for it, because you can't enforce it. They can change their mind the next day, and it's not enforceable. And so I did want you to know that that was a concern for me, that it was offered at 3% when it should only be 1%. The other problems that I have fall along the lines of what Ms. Kaiser just spoke to. I too have had struggling children and grandchildren who have needed my support to find an alternative. And you struggle as a parent or grandparent to make that perfect match. But what I found was that when you get, a program that is directed at making struggling kids successful, like others that we have, and you get them with staff that care, and my goodness, we have staff that care. The successes break your heart to the point of tears and laughter. I mean, Ms. Kaiser and I regularly attend the Fairview graduation and listen to the student statements and testimonies, and they align with what you have heartfeltly conveyed to us. This is what happens when good teachers get in contact with struggling kids. Magic happens. And if your petition is denied, it's not because we don't value all of what you've put into your feelings about your program. It's because that this particular program does not meet the standard that I, as a school board member, feel I must put out there for our kids. And know that, there are answers out there for them.
Any others?
Yeah, I'd just like to make a comment to my colleagues. Would the children that we're talking about here at Pivot, would they have been successful somewhere else? We don't know that. The ones that didn't make their 30 credits in a semester, they could have had a life incident. Something could have happened to them. So whether they be at Pivot or Fairview or Cal, we can't know that, yes, they would have made those 30 credits at Fairview. So that's... It's something to consider.
Can I comment on that a little bit?
Absolutely.
We did do some data discovery on kids that have come back to us, that have gone to Pivot and come back. And in general, when they come back, they are earning more credits, substantially more credits with us than they did while they were at Pivot.
Their life situation could have changed.
It could have, but it's a pretty high percentage.
Okay. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to open up to the public. If you have written a letter to us, and or if you spoke last time, this will be for the people who have not spoken to come up. We also have a 3-minute time limit, and Mr. Hanlon, you'll be doing that, and he has a red wand there. And we also have a total of 20 minutes because we do need to move along. Thank you very much. I'm sorry?
3 for and 3 against. If nobody's against, then we can continue.
Correct. So as Dr. Kaiser says, 3 for, 3 against, and if there are none in that area, we can continue. If there are none for, then against can come up. So go ahead and state your name.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Hello, ladies and gentlemen of the board. My name is James Hepner. I have been a student at Pivot Charter since January of this year. And in my almost 1 full year of this school, it is by far the best school I have ever been to. I am 19 years old, and the reason for my being behind in school is because I transferred from a non-accredited school in Susanville. The school was forced to close, which is why I ended up here. I went to being so far behind in credits to being able to graduate from Pivot this school year. And in the past, I had been to 3 different schools, and all of them were good, but they didn't have the structure I needed to get where I am now. And the teachers at this school that I've worked with, all outstanding. They know what they're doing. I mean, I can't say enough good things about them, especially Travis. He's pretty cool. The students at this school are also really cool, awesome people to know. And being able to call them friends is really, truly a blessing to me. And as a pivot, or as a whole body, we are like just one big happy family. There's no really other way to put that. And this is another reason Pivot has been just a great running school, and why I think Chico Unified should adopt it. Thank you for letting me share. Have a wonderful evening.
Thank you so much.
Mr. President, can I ask for some clarification? If there aren't 3 opposed, can we still take the remaining minutes?
Yes,
What is your
yeah,
policy?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Members of the board, my name is Eric Lohr. I am a student at Pivot Charter. The very first thing I would like to open up with is the whole charts thing with the percentages. They are not proportionate. Pivot Charter has under 100 students compared to your large average schools elsewhere that have over 1,000 or so. Secondly, we look at Fairview, which from what I understood from Miss Eileen Robinson, is it? That is the intention of the board to move the students to Fairview in order to catch them up. But if you took a look at the data set they provided, you get a good idea that Fairview is not only significantly lower percentage of grades, credits, and otherwise related to Pivot with a significantly smaller portion of students compared to their significantly larger portion of students. In closing, Pivot not only exceeds Fairview in every single point, it also has a place in my heart. I went to PV before I went to Pivot. Absolute worst school I've ever been to.
You don't say that stuff. You don't say that. Do you have anything else positive to say?
Yeah.
Keep it positive, all right.
All right. Since coming to Pivot, it's the only school that's ever offered me a chance to actually learn. I was a member of special ed kids. I wasn't given an education. I was told, you go sit quietly in the back of the class, you smile, and you take your grade. They didn't grade us on academics. They graded us on how you sat quietly and didn't disturb the class. Quite frankly, that's just wrong. And Pivot, since offering me academics, I walked in there, I had no idea what any of it was. No idea. But you know, I took that as a challenge to learn and learn. The kids at Pivot aren't your average run-of-the-mill students you see at Fairview and such. They're kids like me who weren't challenged. They weren't given a chance. Most of them were probably just shoved in the back of the class and shunned. They didn't have great social lives. They weren't your overachievers. I'm not even one of them. But you know, I walk into Pivot, I see kids just like me who struggled at one point and are finding potential. They have potential and they have the means to become excellent students. Their grades could, quite honestly, soar if they really wanted to. They're all geniuses at heart.
Okay, your time has come up, so thank you very much. And I think what I'm going to do right now is, Mr. Moretti, let's let Mr. Moretti go so I could see what area he has to make comments. So
I'd be speaking in opposition. As a citizen, I'm concerned that charter school boards have no public accountability like your board. Citizens in the Chico Unified Library have the right to vote school board members in and out of office. We don't have that right with charter school boards, even though both organizations are funded with public tax dollars coming out of the same pot. I visited special ed classrooms Monday with CTA and NEA representatives. Chico is running some amazing programs, but they're expensive. I was in one class that had 8 students with 5 adult employees. That type of ratio is not an exception. Chico has to take millions of dollars out of the general fund every year in order to provide these exceptional programs that are federally mandated. Does Pivot provide these expensive programs? And if not, do they help Chico with these costs? And if not, we have a situation where the charter gets a vastly disproportionate amount of students who are less expensive to educate. And Chico, that same type of student, the less expensive one, will get potentially fewer resources than a Pivot student, since Chico has to divert general ed funds to cover special ed programs that Pivot does not. In my opinion, charter schools are supposed to provide an educational model that's substantially different from what is being offered by the local school districts. The whole idea behind the charter movement was to allow for experimentation. I don't see anything substantially different between Pivot's model and the wide variety of independent study programs Chico offers, not just at Fairview, but at PV and Chico High. Pivot's results are far below Chico's. They run a program with not the same public accountability regarding board elections. They have a looser set of ed code rules. They avoid the extra costs of the expensive special ed programs, offering a model pretty similar to Chico's, and they fall far below Chico's results. Approving their charter seems, from my perspective, to be a disservice not just to the students and staff of Chico, but the students of Pivot as well.
Thank you very much. Okay, anybody else?
Hi, members of the board. My name is Nico. When I first left my old school, I did not like to participate in school, nor did I truly really like it. But I decided to take 6 months out of that school to do nothing with my life. But ever since transferring to Pivot, I decided to change my life, turn it around, and try to make something out of myself. This man who I'm standing with here, his name is Travis. He's actually been the whole reason why I wanted to change my life around. He's helped me push myself past my goals. Yes, I take classes that are probably under my education level, but he is the person who I go to for everything I need help with. And he, like I said, changed my life around, makes me want to do something with my life. So if there's a reason to help support the school, he's the single reason why you should do it among the amazing staff that they have. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Good evening. It's a big night for us. I'm a little more nervous than I usually am, but it's wonderful to be back in front of you again. I really did appreciate the process. I meant that from the bottom of my heart. It was very professional, and we met some incredible educators from Chico Unified that came to visit the school, as well as several of you. We appreciate that staff really, I think, do understand that our students are very unique. I also think that they understood that we have similar goals, which is to get more kids high school diplomas. And where I feel we're not 100% on the same page is on the capacity of those kids that are coming to Pivot. If they could do 30 credits in a semester, they wouldn't need Pivot. They wouldn't be knocking on our door. They wouldn't be asking to enroll. Our goal is to get them re-engaged in education and making them feel confident and secure. We actually do have a counseling staff. We presented a lot of material about our level of special ed and our counseling to Mr. Bohannon when he requested it on November 7th. These students are coming to us not focused on getting their credits. They're focused on just getting their act together and even caring about doing school again. A lot of them are coming to us from Fairview not having done credits. And yes, we are not 100% successful with all of the kids. We can't get all of them to get credits either. But our kids, the kids that are coming to us so far behind or so shut down on school that getting 10 credits their first semester with us is a huge, huge win. And no, I'm not going to just stop there and let them stop at 10 credits a semester. What we shoot for is if they are that far behind, we gradually get them caught up. Our 210 credits that are required for the diploma can get them into a Cal State or a University of California school if they're taking the right classes and on our diploma, on our university prep track. So it's not like it's too few credits. So we focus on that, the diploma. What's going to get you there? And it's going to be gradual, and sometimes, like Nico, they're fifth-year seniors. But we're okay with that, and if you're not, I understand that, but we're okay with the alternative is them dropping out. And we gave also a document to Mr. Bohannon when he asked for it, and we sent it to him on November 7th. In the last 3 years, Chico Unified students that were at Pivot 3 years ago, 3 students didn't go back to a school. 2 years ago, 3 students from Chico Unified from Pivot did not go back to a school. And last year, there were 5 kids, which was 8%, that did not go back to some type of school. They could have gone to private or out of state, and we just don't know. But in CalPEDS, they're considered dropouts at that point. But this shows you, and as we showed the staff and the charter committee, what number of our students are going back to school after Pivot. So that attrition rate is like, okay, but they're going back and they're graduating. That is our goal, is to get them to do that. I'm not embarrassed with our attrition rate when we're seeing how many are coming back to you, your own students. The credits, yeah, they might be a little bit further behind, but they're getting more with us, and you heard the kids and their parents. They're getting more with us than they would have if they had not come to Pivot. We get them back on track, and they want to go back and prove themselves, and then they start to get back on track. But yes, they may have gotten a little bit further behind than their peers in reaching their 210 on time. But that's why we exist. That's why we're here, so they can at least get something. It's better than nothing. And many of them, as we showed you in our data and we sent to Mr. Bohannon the other day, we have, it was 40% of our kids last year got 20 credits or more on average when they finished semesters. Not 30 credits, but 20 credits. And everyone else was in between. But that was a huge success for those kids. And again, that's why we're here.
Okay, thank you. You reached your time. Okay, we have one more. Yeah. No, go ahead. We've had, this will be the 5th in favor of Pivot, and we had 1 opposed. So this will be the last one.
The last in favor?
I'm sorry?
Last period.
Last period?
Last one, period. No, period.
Yeah, this is the last one. This will be the 6th.
Okay. Okay, no pressure, right? Good evening, board members, Superintendent Staley. Thank you for your time this evening. My name is Janelle Ruley. I'm an attorney with the law offices of Young, Minnie, and Core. We represent more than half the charter schools in the state, all up and down the state. I have to say, I came here tonight pretty optimistic about option B. You know, I thought we had a winner with option B, and I was really hoping that we were going to all be on board with that, and I still hope that there's a chance for that. There are a couple things I wanted to correct that were talked about a little earlier. First of all, and I want to say unambiguously, Pivot Charter Schools and Rhodes Education Organization do comply with the Brown Act. They do. They post their meeting agendas, they follow the requirements, all of that. The only thing that we said in that response was exactly what Mr. Ye had said to you, which is that some charter schools take the argument that because we have to enroll students from anywhere in the state, our boundaries are actually anywhere in the state. We're not using that argument. The only thing that Pivot said is that it can meet within the geographic boundaries of the counties where it operates, which is exactly consistent with, as Mr. Ye said, the facilities restrictions that are now applying to independent study charter schools. There was a concern, too, about lottery procedures, and I just wanted to say at the time that the charter was submitted, the only thing we had to describe in the charter petition were our admission requirements, nothing really about lottery procedures. The law doesn't even change until January 1. That said, we do have lottery procedures, and those are available. So we'd be glad to tell you all about that. I don't expect anybody wants to hear about that tonight, but we do have procedures. If we do have the option to kind of go the option B route, I did want to ask that the board consider really carefully a 2-year charter term, because with a 2-year term, we would be right back here 1 year after operation seeking renewal. And I just wanted to make sure that we had a full discussion of that. So if we have the opportunity to have option B discussed, we'd be glad to talk with you about that more. As you know, Pivot has been here in your community here in Chico for 7 years. They've been good neighbors. They would have continued in that fashion if there weren't a court in Shasta County saying, giving an interpretation of law that's different from how everybody else interpreted it for 15 years in the state. And it's only for that reason that we're actually here before you tonight. That said, we're very happy to partner with Chico Unified. I think you've seen how genuine this community is, how very much they want to engage with you, and we're here to make that deal tonight. We're here for option B, and hope that you are as well. And you can be heroes to all these people. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Okay, we have a motion and a second on the floor, so I am going to now call for the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion does not pass. Okay, so now we can go on to...
All right, I will move option B with the clarification that, as was mentioned by John Ye, there was a typographical error. So the motion is to grant the charter for a 2-year term starting July 1st, 2018, may only offer grades 6 through 12, may annually maintain or allow no more than a 25% attrition in its entire student population. So there's no double counting or undercounting. It will be an absolute count. You must show growth overall and in all subgroups mandated by the state in both English language arts and math, using the pupil performance of the Pivot North Valley Resource Center for the 2017-18 year as a benchmark, and the percentage of the charter schools' high school students earning no less than 30 a semester so that they can transfer back to a public high school on track shall be consistent with the percentage of Chico Unified students earning 30 units a semester. So this is a match, a mathematical match. So that's my motion on option B. John? Excuse me, there's a correction, right?
No, there's an addition. There are 2 additional paragraphs
Oh, I'm
below.
sorry. Okay. Yeah, in the event that you fail to meet any of those conditions, you agree to surrender your charter upon demand by the district. There will be no debate. Should the charter school refuse to surrender the charter, it agrees that it will waive all of the procedural requirements set forth in Ed Code Section 47607 and its implementing regulations with respect to revocation of the charter, and the district shall be entitled to summarily revoke the charter through the board action with no right to appeal or judicial challenge by the charter. You must enter into an MOU containing the above terms no later than 30 days following board action. Otherwise, the board's granting of the petition will be rescinded and the petition will be denied. Anything else? Okay.
Okay, that's a motion made.
That's B.
Motion, yeah, but I don't have a second.
Then what? All right.
I will second that motion.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Do we have now any discussion amongst the board members? Ms. Robinson.
Just to clarify that if B passes, we have 30 days to do that MOU, and the MOU can't go into effect until this board acts to approve it, correct?
Yes, the MOU would have to be signed and executed and brought back to the board. And I would recommend before the board proceeded with this option that the board ask and obtain Pivot's commitment to agreeing to option B. If they don't agree to the terms, then
Yes.
I believe that acting on option B would be moot.
Yes.
I have another, thank you, Mr. Ye. I have another procedural question, Mr. Chairman.
Well, let's find out.
I'm sorry. What was your question?
If option B fails, do we then go back to option A again to see if we can get a majority, or are we finished with business, and how does that work? Do we wait for our 5th board member to return?
I believe it is possible if we want to go back to another vote, we can. And I also believe that we can do the same thing that we have a timetable that we were to meet with this, to make a decision, but it would have to be extended. Is that correct, Mr. Bohannon? Or Mr. Ye?
The education code says that the board shall grant or deny the charter within 60 days, and with mutual agreement, and Pivot did mutually agree to extend another 30 days. And we are close to the end of the 90-day period.
Yeah,
so
we have
the
to
board would need to reach a decision tonight.
Okay, thank you.
That was
So
my.
may I ask Pivot then if they are satisfied with the terms of this option B and feel that they can implement it?
It's scary. It's really scary because we're not close to the numbers that you're setting forth, but we've never backed away from a challenge in the past. Every single one of our kids has been a challenge. Yes, we agree to option B.
Great. Thank you.
And appreciate it.
Okay, so we have a motion on the floor and second. Any other discussion among the board members? Okay, any discussion from the audience? Okay.
Thank you for coming for the board. I'll make this real short. But I appreciate everything I heard, and something I was thinking when we talked about losing credits when you move. I know all the teachers and everyone have made my son very, very aware of where he stands and how he earns his credits, so that if he's not up there, they're constantly on him to keep him where he needs to be. And my son spoke. He has an IEP, and he's been in a lot of different schools in this area, and he has pretty much been told to sit in the back and be quiet. And when he got to Pivot, he was way, way below his grade average, and they've worked really hard to catch him up to where he's up to his grade average. And it's honestly the first time I thought he would graduate high school with a diploma. So I appreciate everything they've done.
Thank you very much. Mr. Bohannon?
Before I vote, I'd like to provide a little Pivot history lesson. Pivot, as you all know, was originally chartered by Chico Unified with a equally, if not more stringent set of conditions. I believe at the time, actually, those conditions were dictated by a motion by Dr. Kaiser. And instead of living up to those conditions, they chose to petition a different district because they felt like they could be more successful without those conditions. So I'm a little bit leery of, again, entering into an MOU. I want to make sure everybody understood the history of how we got where we are.
Can I respond since my name
Yes,
is?
you may.
So I did not put in this the specificity of what was already mentioned of qualifying for a CSU, a UC, or community college. However, I think the specificity of this option B speaks loudly, and you signed an MOU, that's it. So.
All right, any others? Seeing none, the motion's been made and a second. I call the question for option B. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? No. No. Motion passes 3-1.
I just want to clarify for Ms. Robinson's question about approval of the MOU. What you guys just approved was that Pivot would agree to the MOU within 30 days, not that this board would approve that same within 30 days. So they would have until essentially January 6th to agree to an MOU, which we will get them a draft of shortly. And then should that happen, we would bring it back to this board at the regular January meeting.
Thank you very much. I'm going to just recess very shortly. This will be like 4.5 minutes, 5 minutes. That's it. I'll be hammering back. So quick recess.
Yes. Oh.
Okay, we're going to call our meeting back to order. I'm calling the meeting back to order. My mic's not on. Where's? It's on, but they have me turned off.
Guys, where are they?
Hello. We need our mics on. Is it coming? It's coming. It's coming. There we go. Okay, we're back in session. We are on item 11.2.1. Adoption of resolution number 1406-17, Mr. Boltema. That's not Mr. Boltema. Am I in the wrong spot? No?
It has Kevin's name on it, but I'm going to present for it.
Okay, so we are on 11.2.1, correct?
11.2.1, yes.
Yes. 11.2.1.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No problem. Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. We bring before you tonight resolution number 1406-17, and it's a necessary resolution where you will authorize a representative of the district, which will be me, acting on behalf of Superintendent Staley, to enter agreements with the State Water Resources Control Board for the point-of-use devices to be installed at Nord Country School. This is reverse osmosis filtration systems at every water spigot in the school that supplies drinking water. This will replace the bottled water that we have been supplying since the beginning of the school year, and this will continue up until the time that we have drilled their new well and they're back on drinking water from their well. So we recommend approval of resolution 1406-17.
Ms. Kissel, is this a cost savings over the bottled water? Is that the reason for this change?
No, it's definitely not a cost savings. It's about $25,000. We will be reimbursed by the state for the cost, but it will be much easier for the SAFE to ensure that the students and the staff are drinking safe water, and it will be much easier logistically than supplying the bottled water to the site.
Right, lifting those puppies up.
I move 11.2.1.
Okay, motion's been made. I'm sorry.
Second.
And a second's been made. Any other discussion? Seeing none. Any discussion from the audience? I see none. All those in favor? Aye. Passes.
Roll call that one? I second.
Okay, and Lynn is correct. We need a roll call because the last one didn't pass. She voted no.
Oh, you have to do it every time?
We should have done roll call on the second one. When somebody votes no, yeah.
Oh, wow.
So,
Okay.
Hovey, aye.
Lustal, aye.
Kaiser, aye.
Robinson, aye.
Okay. All right, now we move to 11.2.2.
Thank you. Again, this is another resolution number 1408-17, the adoption of procedures for evaluating competitive proposals for lease-leaseback contractors. This is a supplement to the process that we have established already. Just let me do a quick review. We created a pool of contractors for our large Phase 3 master plan projects, and we have already selected contractors for Shasta Elementary School and the high school stadium projects. Also Loma Vista and Marigold. So the last one that we have coming forward will be for Neil Dow, and we are ready to start with that right now. This is a template that we're putting in front of you that we'll use into the future for future phases. It integrates some things that we were lacking. One thing in particular is appeal language, so that if a contractor goes through this competitive selection process and they question our judgment on the selection, they have a process to follow, which we were lacking before, and that will document this. It also documents that final selection competition, so that it's meant to be modified for project specificity, where we might be at in the schedule of implementation and the completeness of the plans for the project at the time. So it would be modified to suit each project. And when we modify it for Neil Dow, which will be the next one, we will bring it back for ratification so that it is approved by the board specifically for that selection process for that project. And that's what we've done in the past.
So I just want to comment before I make a motion. This was, for everyone, a brand-new process, and last year, not this year, but last year at CSBA, I was kind of stunned by people who had not had any experience at all with going for a bond. I think I would be equally stunned by the people who didn't really understand or prepare for their competitive proposals. So I want to compliment you and your staff, although looks like most of them left to go party. But I think this is exactly what we need to do, a template that we can refer to over every project, but also allow for specificity. So with that, I move 11.2.2.
I'll second that.
Okay, motion's been made and second. Do we have any other discussion? I see none. Any discussion from the audience? Seeing none. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Passes 4-0. Okay, 11.2.3.
Yes. So at Chico Unified, we are part of the Northern California Schools Insurance Group. And as noted in the lead sheet, we also work with a group called SELF for additional insurance. And frankly, that group has been struggling over the last number of years. We provided you their net position, which has gone from $34 million at the end of the 2013-14 fiscal year to just over $3 million at the end of last fiscal year. With that, we are recommending approval of the letter to disenroll or withdraw our membership within SELF. This will provide us additional flexibility. We are still working with the director of NCSIG, Eric Knack, also our claims adjuster, to go ahead and figure out the different options we have for this higher band of insurance pool. We think there will be options, but the insurance market has certainly changed, especially in these higher band areas. So with that said, our recommendation is to move for approval to withdraw from SELF at this time, and we will bring you options in the next coming months.
Dr. Kaiser.
So my queasiness is, informed by the number of people who enter into employment without realizing they won't have insurance coverage for a month, and then some disaster happens. So how confident are you that this is going to get a positive place to land before July 1?
Well, let me be clear. This is for property and liability insurance.
Yes.
So this is not our health care.
Okay, I know.
Property and liability, and this is the higher band of insurance outside of, within the pool. So the pool self-insures within a certain band, and then we go ahead and then work with SELF to provide coverage at the higher claims rates.
You've seen the films of Southern California, right?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
I am confident that we'll have other options. Is it going to be expensive? It possibly will be more expensive than certainly what we're paying now. But we are confident there will be options. It will just look different. So it is a very, I will say it is a very fluid issue right now, because what has happened is this has come up in the last 6 weeks. And frankly, every single district that is a member is having to make the decision to withdraw or not.
Okay.
We have heard from SELF. They are still interested in our business. So if we withdraw, they still want to be able to try and provide some quotes and are open to us coming back.
Okay, that was.
We still have options, even within SELF.
That was important. So, all right, with that, I recommend 11.2.3.
I have another question, though, for Mr. Boltema. So is there a timeline to withdraw from that JPA? Is that why we're doing this now?
That is correct.
Okay.
It's actually December 15th.
Got it. And then SELF is separate from NCSIG? And so we are keeping all the other liability, it's just the excess we are pulling from?
Correct, and that would be effective
July 1. Okay, very good. Thank you.
Anybody else? Anybody from the audience?
Oh, Linda, did you second it?
No, but I'd be happy to.
Okay, yeah, she started to talk and I thought. Anyway, we have a motion and we have a second. We have no more discussion from the board. Do we have any discussion from the audience? I see none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, passes 4-0. Okay. And now we are on 11.2.4.
Oh, thank goodness. The women's show. But it's his birthday, so we'll go.
Yeah,
see,
just let him
right?
sit there.
Yeah, take it.
We can take a small break. Good evening, Board. We're here to present to you first interim budget. These are our updated projections for the remainder of the year, but we also, in our formal report to the state, include actuals through October 31st. There we go. So in a brief overview, we want to remind you that when we draft original budget in April, May, and we bring it to you in June for approval, the state hasn't actually adopted the state budget yet, so we're going off a lot of assumptions from the May revision from the governor. So at first interim, you're probably going to see the most amount of changes from one budget to another because we have the state budget, we have carryover dollars now that our books are closed from the prior year, we have actual enrollment of students versus projections, so a lot of variables that are taken into account with first interim. Staffing, we have all our hired staff. So just want to make you aware that sometimes you'll see big swings between original budget and first interim, and those are largely due to that. One of the things we do in the fall, which is a great opportunity for Marie and I to get out to all the school sites, is Marie and I split all the schools, and we go and meet with each of the principals regarding their budgets. So we talk about their carryover dollars from the prior year, we talk about the current year allocation that every school has, and what their spending plan is. Specifically, a lot of time is spent on LCAP, related to the site LCAP goals that support the district goals that the board has. So it's a great opportunity to kind of sit and work one-on-one with the principals. John Bohannon also attends those as well from an educational compliance perspective. And lastly, we want to remind you that at the interim reports, there is a self-certification, positive, meaning we will meet our obligations in the current year and the 2 future years. Qualified, we may not, and negative is we will not. I'm happy to say we're positive, so no worries. A couple major themes that we're going to talk about tonight, 4 main themes. Impact of one-time funding. So the governor, for the 3rd year now, has given one-time funding, but we're choosing to spend that over multiple years to kind of get the biggest bang for our buck. So you'll see that we receive revenue in 1 year, but we're spending it out in multiple years. So when we actually have our formal document for you, the board, through the SACs, sometimes it can be a little bit warped in the sense that we're spending down dollars from prior years, so it doesn't reflect ongoing operations. So one of the things that we will present to you later, I think it's on Kevin's slides, for the multi-year projections, we're going to provide the one that's the formal document through SACs that the board will actually approve this evening, that we'll submit to CDE, as well as a multi-year projection that has all the one-time money taken out, so we can really talk about what are Chico Unified's kind of annual operations and what that looks like. Another positive that we have is enrollment is in the 3rd year of growth, and we're projecting growth going forward. So that's a great position to be in. But we do have the annual person STIRS increases that we talk about every single time that we're here. So speaking of one-time money, we're going to go back 3 years to 15-16. And the one-time money, we got a lot of one-time money that year. It was $5.9 million. We're spending that over many years. So we're actually going to spend the last of the arts and music money in 1920. So many of the items have already been spent down, but you can see here that we still have arts and music, technology, some facilities money, and some classroom budgets that we still have a little bit left on. In 16-17, we had some one-time money as well, about $2.4 million. And some of that was spent last year. We did get a new bus for transportation. but a significant amount will be spent this year in technology. So the $947,000 that you see there is what our IT department used to buy almost 6,000 Chromebooks related to the one-on-one rollout device. So that money has been budgeted and been spent. 6,000, yeah.
Did that include some replacement cost as well?
Yeah, so we bought more than what we actually needed for the rollout, and we have some in inventory that if one gets lost or schools need to just buy 2 or 3, they don't necessarily need a whole cart full, they can purchase it from our inventory.
Thank you.
And lastly is current year one-time money, so about $1.7 million. At the last board meeting, the board took action on how to kind of appropriate those dollars, so about half went to compensation, $400,000 for playground upgrades, and $460,000 for textbook and curriculum. And I know Ed Services is actively creating a plan related to textbook adoption and how to spend that $460,000.
Ms. Kruger, the 17-18 one-time monies have not been received yet, though?
They've not been received.
Do you know when they will?
The prior year, we got 50% in January, 25% in April, I believe, and 25% in May. So it's the second half of the year.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So I wanted to talk about increasing ADA. We're in a great position at Chico Unified. We have greater enrollment and greater ADA. This is a lot of numbers, I understand, on the slide. So the highlighted line is our projection for the current year. So we're projecting our P2 ADA at 11,667. Our enrollment's up 252 from prior year. So since we are in an increasing enrollment environment, what we've done for the 2 out years in our multi-year projection, you can see that on the screen in front of you, is we did a 3-year average of prior years because we don't want to be too aggressive on growth, but we acknowledge that there may be some growth in future years. But then we also were very conservative on our TK numbers, and we kept our kindergarten numbers flat. Kindergarten has been coming in very consistently at 870 each year. So that's kind of the wild card population. We don't know how many kindergartners we're going to get, so we decided to stay a little conservative and do no increase in the future years for those. So a better slide that may be a little bit easier to read is kind of the graphical image of those numbers that I just presented. So the blue line is our enrollment as of CBEDS, which, a reminder, is the first Wednesday of October. And the green bar is our actual P2 ADA that we get funded on. And now I'm going to turn it over to Marie for her section.
Okay, so some of the major assumptions that we went with on this first interim budget, the local control funding formula is based on the state adopted budget with the COLA of 1.56% and the gap funding percentage is 43.19. Funded ADA projection is 11,667. Like Jacqueline said, that's an increase of about 240 students from 16-17. Unduplicated students, which is also a factor in our LCFF, identified is 45.99%, which is an increase from original budget. So we're getting more of those unduplicated count. The one-time funds, as Jacqueline spoke to, of $1.7 million for 17-18 is included in both revenue and expense. Salaries and benefits reflect position control as of November 15th, which include vacancies. And then we'll talk about STIRS and PERS later in the multi-year projection, but I know you're aware that they're increasing costs every year for STIRS and PERS. Okay, this is the income statement. This is a lot of numbers, I realize. A couple things to point, Okay, a couple things to point out here. If you look at revenues, our LCFF is approximately 94% of our unrestricted revenues. So almost all of our revenue at Chico Unified comes from that formula. Another thing to look at on here is, what was I thinking? Oh, the bottom line change in fund balance. We're showing spending in the red. deficit spending here. This is mostly due to the effects of one-time money. So Kevin's going to speak to the multi-year projection with those one-time funds taken out. Okay, this is the income statement in a graphical format. Notes on this is unrestricted and restricted. If you look at salaries and benefits, it represents 84% of our total expenditures. If we looked at this just an unrestricted view with unrestricted plus special ed, that would be closer to 90, 91% of our total expenditures. You've seen this slide before, but it's always a good reminder. Where we were is the floor column on the left with the old revenue limit calculation, categoricals, and then the gap. Now the gap is closing as we get closer to that fully funded target. So this represents where we are right now in 17-18. We still have a little remaining gap. And then the orange line is the funded gap that they're closing to this year. And then this is the target where there will be no more additional funding after we reach that target.
Can you remind me what the grade span, excuse me, what the grade span adjustment is?
Yeah, the grade span adjustment is part of the calculation where we get extra funding for, keeping our lower level classes at under 24, in high school. So considerations on the LCFF, we're getting closer to reaching the target funding amount. There's rumor that we will be fully funded in 18-19, but we'll see. Right now, our unfunded gap is $3.2 million. As we get closer, the gap funding percentages yield smaller amounts of revenues. And then once we reach the target, we will only get COLA and whatever increase in ADA yields. Okay, the detail for our other financing sources, uses, contributions, we always like to look at this to see what's in that bottom row. Transfers in from other funds are 2.6 million. RDA pass-throughs for maintenance is 2.5, and developer fee is 100,000. Transfers out to other funds, we project to transfer 615 out to nutrition services. The other sources represents loan for purchase of 8 buses. I'll show you the effects of that on the income statement in the next slide. And contributions to restricted programs, 18 million. Special ed is 14.7, and then that routine restricted maintenance is 4.1. Yes.
So we may have to wake Kevin up, but no, just wake him up. The context for this was a discussion in the ER about the City Council having a discussion about the potential of changing the developer fees by size of units, and there appeared to be a great deal of non-support for making this change. But it seemed to be a very contentious thing between developers looking at potentially paying way, way more for bigger houses. So I just wondered if we have any heads up about whether they actually might pass a fee.
We probably need to talk to the city of Chico specifically. I'm not aware of what their plan is. It's very clear in Ed Code that there are certain amounts that we can charge based on our specific developer fee justification study. So I can't imagine what the city is going to do would change that Ed Code. So we wouldn't expect any change for the amount that we would charge. Okay. We are appreciative of the city because they are the ones that ultimately have the application filled out, and they're the ones that ultimately make the determination whether it's residential or commercial. So we work together in that regard, but the fee structure in Ed Code, I don't see that changing.
Okay, thank you very much. Sorry to wake you up, you can go back.
Okay. Oops. Okay. This slide shows where we were at original budget versus where we are at first interim, and explains why the change. So one thing in here to look at is the effect of buying those 8 buses. You'll see that in 4 places on this. Local revenues with that clean air grant, the purchase in capital outlay, the loan payment in other outgo, and then the loan proceeds come in down in transfers and contributions. So that was a big change from original to first interim. Also, our increased ADA. We projected that we would grow in 17-18, but we didn't. We were more conservative at original budget. Let's see. In certificated salaries, in original budget, we didn't take into account the 6/5 positions, which is the teachers who teach an extra section in high school. And classified salaries, we eliminated the vacancies that were unfilled or, were not expected to be filled. Okay, so we went from a negative 2.3 change in fund balance to negative 1.6 change in fund balance in unrestricted. And so that was a change of 700,000. Okay. Kevin will talk about multi-year projection.
I guess before you start, Kevin, may I ask Marie a question? Or
Can
Kevin,
you put
you
your
could answer
mic
too.
on? Oh, it is? Oh.
The contributions to the restricted programs, the special ed, that 14,000,007, and the RRMA, are those consistent with last year's contributions? Are they higher? Are they lower?
Special education is higher, substantially higher. We saw an addition of classrooms added related to students that are identified through their IEPs.
Got it.
We always continue to struggle a little bit with the non-public school placements. That's one of those numbers that if you have a student that ultimately serves, it can be a really high number. So it does tend to be higher at original. We have a sense of who those students are and how many at first interim, so we are able to ratchet that down, but we still have a pretty high number of non-public school placement dollars, I believe, at first interim.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome. And just a reminder on this slide, we gave you a 45-day budget update. That is not something we normally do. So you shouldn't be surprised to see a variance of 1.6 million on the revenue, because we talked about that just, a month or so ago. But here's the multi-year projections, which we really think is kind of an extremely important look at the budget for Chico Unified. First of all, Jacqueline already mentioned this, we are projecting increased ADA in the out years. And I'm going to tell you, if there's any risk within this budget, that's it. We have used historically averages to predict our ADA and enrollment, and it has been a good tool to do that. And as Jacqueline pointed out, we're conservative within that TKK environment. So we don't think we're being overly aggressive, but it is something that we're going to have to watch closely. So we certainly match staff to that increased ADA. We also budget for all step and column, STRS and PERS costs, and then we also have some increased costs for utility and fuel. We also understand that we're going to have some net savings when we have retirees, both within their placements on the salary schedule, but also then health benefits. And we do note that we're estimating another 30 certificated retirements in 2018-19 and 20 in 19-20. So the next slide is important. We have talked about this gap funding percentage for quite a while, and we're getting to the end. It's interesting how quickly that's occurred, but ultimately we pointed out to the board that we chose to use an average between the Department of Finance and school services. Can I say that's right? I think Department of Finance has been probably closer over the period of implementation, but we did personally experience an environment where DOF was higher, and we saw $2.3 million just evaporate within our multi-year projection. So we think that, although it has historically been more accurate, this is not a time to completely go with DOF, just understanding the risk involved with that gap. So we have chosen to average. We want to be clear about that. And we have increased expenses related to all-day kindergarten in 18-19. So in the multi-year projection, we note that we have schools that are going to be implementing the all-day K program. We have aides that are being placed in those classrooms to help with that implementation.
So, curious, now I know that due to some friends of mine who have children in kindergarten and then we're both teachers, they were having to arrange, since they both taught, transportation from their kindergarten school to the after-school care program that they could get into. And, you know, as friends for a month or so, we were the transportation because they literally couldn't do it. But when we do all-day K, will there still be some kind of after-school framework that's needed for those parents? You know what I'm saying? In other words, they were teachers and they had similar work days, but other people are not teachers and have longer work days. So I'm just wondering.
See, this is an example of ed services and business services working together.
Look at that. Such a nice joint. You know, from part of it, the after-school program has been there off and on, but it's not worked. It's not been K-driven, but CARD has been. So all the schools that have that opportunity out there also have a CARD program that parents can pay for to have extended care for, whether they're kindergarten first, whatever the grade is.
My understanding, and I'm sorry to speak over you, was CARD filled up 2 years in advance. So that is not a good answer when we're...
Yes, CARD books up. I know they're far ahead and they've got one program and I think what I've heard from CARD though is if they have enough people that are interested, they are open to opening additional sections or, you know, hiring more staff to have more spaces in the after-school program. They kind of need a critical mass to get enough kids to make it worthwhile with their staff.
Well, I hope that we're in early communication about that so that we're, you know, working in conjunction. I mean, these teachers were going nuts.
One of the things that we kind of shared a lot at the kindergarten fair is if you're interested in this, let CARD know now.
Okay.
Just so they can have a little lead time to kind of know that there may be more interest with it also.
They're shaking their head over here, yeah.
Okay. And then we also note that within the local control accountability plan, we have planned to have an additional $250,000 for the next 3 years, so that ultimately we have $1 million within the LCAP for replacement of computers for students. So here is our multi-year projection look as across for just the unrestricted side of the budget. And I would just point your attention to that net increase or decrease in fund balance. So you see that negative 1.6, and then a small positive change of 262,000, and then a positive change of 2 million. But as already been mentioned, one-time money's flowing through here. So we run another multi-year projection where we pull all the one-time money out, revenue and expenditures, to get a true sense of what's happening operationally here. And you can see that really what we see is that we have a positive fund balance in all three years, 1.4 million, again 1.4 million, and then 2 million in the 2019-20 year, which frankly is more representative because that's all the one-time money's out. That's where we think we're going to be. I also note that we have to adjust the beginning fund balance, right? Because if you take all those reserves out of that calculation, your fund balance is smaller that you're starting with. So that is noted in gray as well. I think what this says is we're a healthy budget. We've talked about this before. We were balanced previously, and we still think we are balanced today because I remind the board we have not reached settlement for compensation with any of our bargaining units. And for us, you know, 1% is about $1 million. And we certainly then have all the components of fund balance that we're required to have, not only the state, we have the board's 2% designation, and we still have very healthy reserves of undesignated fund balance. So this is the slide we always end on. It is the stark reality of just the increased cost in STRS and PERS. We are in a different position than City of Chico, for example, in that our local control funding formula being implemented has really helped us in this environment. Frankly, we've had an additional source of revenue from the state to make sure that we can cover this because, you know, we're talking $1 million a year, year-over-year increase. So we're just very thankful that the local control funding formula, and this gap has continued to be closed. So just to kind of sum this up, we do show deficit spending in the current 17-18 year, but again, that's due to one-time money. If you take the one-time money out, we're positive. Again, compensation settlements have not been reached with any of our bargaining units. And, you know, we've talked that this fear of the next recession and the next recession, and, you know, we're starting to sound like a broken record on that. But we just keep kind of plugging away in the state of California. So we also hear, and one of the kind of more important issues for us is that the governor, this will be his last budget, that he's going to want to end on a high note and fully fund the local control funding formula as he heads out. So we'll be very eager to see what the budget looks like in January for next year. So we'll monitor that budget. We'll continue to evaluate our programs to make sure that what we're offering is within the frameworks of our budget, and we're hopeful we can reach those compensation settlements with our bargaining units so that we can update second interim as a full picture of what costs are for the district. So I'm really pleased with this budget in that we do have dollars that we can have conversations about compensation with and work with that, and we do have healthy reserves. So with that, I certainly want to credit Marie and Jacqueline on the hard work they do on a regular basis. I would also say we have a couple accountants in our office who we have expanded and are now working within the budget and having hands-on experience within it. And I will tell you, for the first time in my career, we ran the technical checks through the standard accounting code structure software, and we had 0 errors. And I just think it speaks to how clean the general ledger is with the Chico Unified now. It's a very, very clean financial system. We're very pleased with it.
Right.
Eileen.
Kevin, thank you. I have a question, something I hadn't thought about until this very moment. If we're reaching the end of our LCFF gap funding, the you know, those one-time monies that came out for 3 or 4 years that, you know, that's not one time. We're ending that as we reach full funding. So then we're just at COLA. How do we fund the STRS and PERS increases with just COLA?
Yeah, those out years, 1920 and 2021, because it'll end in 2021, potentially could be a challenge. So we're going to have to monitor that. I don't have a good answer other than to say I think we'll be positioned in the out years to have dollars to handle it. And, you know, cost of living adjustment, if you look in the multi-year projection, it's still estimated to be over 2%. So there will be some increased revenue based on projections today of how the state is performing that will help with those dollars. Now, will it be enough to do everything and add program or even pay for some of the increased cost to our program? And this goes back to the conversation we had earlier in the year of potential cuts if we had to make those, what those might look like. We just may find ourselves in a position we won't have the dollars that we hopefully have had over the last few years for compensation. And we also need to specifically look at our program and make sure that it is having the most impact for our students and that we can afford it. So, you know, in that out year, 2021, the world will look differently, but I think we'll be well positioned for it because we'll have good reserves, and we'll just have to see how the state economy performs.
Okay. Any others?
I would just like to thank the team for this interim budget. I am very, very pleased with it. And if there's no other discussion from my board colleagues, I'd like to make the motion to approve the first interim budget.
Second.
Okay, motion's been made and has a double second. So, any other discussion? Seeing none, any from the audience? I see none. All those in favor? Aye. Passes. Thank you very much. We now move to 11.2.5. Mr. Boltema.
What's the heading on that one, Gary?
Oh, that's the approval of approval to investigate option to move Inspire Charter School from Chico High School to a portion of Canyon View property.
Eric.
We woke some people up back there.
Great.
Yeah.
So I provided you a lead sheet of ultimately kind of the background and ultimately the basis for recommendation. Let me just kind of summarize a couple things. Why are we bringing this to you now? Frankly, there's funding available through a Prop 51 application by Inspire, and along with the Measure K dollars that were an allocation of charter school facility improvements. The Canyon View property has been cleared of all environmental mitigation requirements. Chico Unified has an interest of improving the pickup and drop-off areas around Chico High School. And Inspire is, in fact, its own 501c3 nonprofit corporation. It is a public school, but it has a 501c3 designation different than it has in the past. So from Inspire's perspective, I'll speak for them, but then I'll let Eric correct me where I'm wrong. But I think if you look at for any future growth at the Chico High School, that'll be a challenge for Inspire. I think having a separate facility will help with its identity in the community. It may help in fundraising for facilities. Inspire would be able to design a campus in support of its educational program if it was a blank slate. And sharing space at Chico High School can be challenging. And for Chico High School, you're looking at 446 less students on that campus. We would look at improved parking and less traffic in that area. There'd be fewer scheduling conflicts as they share space with one another. And the back area of that campus certainly is not as attractive as the rest of the campus, and certainly we'd like to see improvements there. And again, same for Inspire, I think sharing space can be challenging. From the community standpoint, we're looking at potentially less traffic in the downtown area near CSU Chico, Inlow Hospital, and the Esplanade itself. Potential to improve our drop-off and pickup zones on campus at Chico High. Potential to improve traffic flow and reduce some of the traffic within the Mansion Park community. This idea would maintain enough property at Canyon View for a third comprehensive high school, and I think that's important. We will need one here at Chico Unified at some point in time, and that piece of property and that flexibility to deal with our future is very important. And then last, I think the use of the Canyon View property for a high school is consistent with what was talked about with Measure A, as Measure A was passed to have a third high school. So ultimately, as a reminder, all we're asking for this evening is your approval to investigate the option to move Inspire Charter School from Chico High to a portion of the Canyon View property. So our next steps, if it were, you were to approve that publicly, we would use that time to investigate the option and engage stakeholders, because we would have to engage and have conversations with Inspire School of the Arts, their community. We would have to talk with Chico High, certainly with the neighbors near Chico High and the neighbors at the Canyon View property itself, and we would need to talk with the city of Chico. So there's a lot of work to be done, and ultimately what we're asking for is your approval to do that out in public and start to get some information.
So the ER has been really good about running a series of notices about some of the very animated discussion around the issue of the campus, looking at what they call the South Campus neighborhood, and how they're intending to grow that area. So I would think that it would be really appropriate for us to have someone going, and it's in conflict with tonight, so of course, but to have someone participating in those discussions as well, because certainly that's going to impact Chico High and what happens with that property, particularly if they build parking and large dorm on the other side of the street. So that's not directly about this, but I think we ought to keep all of our informational sources open, and I think we ought to be participating. So just a comment.
I would like to just kind of graphically show you, this is, I think it is. So this is Chico High's campus right now, and this is the footprint of where Inspire resides, really right in the middle of the campus itself. There. And what we're talking about, this is our Canyon View property here. And you can see it actually has this kind of flagship, little flag area within the lot. So we're looking at this area here. And one of the unique opportunities here, and again, one of the reasons we're probably bringing this for consideration is there's potential that it could have a completely separate access point, a separate road actually leading into that campus area, because our future third high school, it will have its access road as a new road connecting off of Bruce. So what you really have is an opportunity for really two very complete separate campuses. So that's the general idea. And that's what we're ultimately asking for approval to continue to investigate.
How much space is Inspire currently using at Chico High campus as opposed to the proposal here on Canyon View?
Is that 2 acres?
Is that what you're saying?
You know, I'm thinking it's the 2.5 acre kind of area, I think. And, you know, here you're talking about, this is anywhere from, well, it really could be anything. I mean, honestly, because if it's, depending on where that line goes, it could be 3, 5, 7, depending on where we are. But
room to grow. Good.
Yeah, but there's room there.
The little, panhandle there, that you don't have an exact, is it 7 acres, 8 acres?
I don't have the exact. I think it's about 5 acres from here. It gets more like 7 if you come off of that straight line.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. Kevin, how far along with preliminary discussions are we with Mike Weisenborn? Do we have any kind of a time frame for this? Oh, Mike Weisenborn.
Call his name and he's there.
I know, he exists.
He exists. And he exists in a good frame of mind. This is a very interesting topic to me, obviously. The reason that we want to get started on looking at this option and doing it in a straightforward matter is because it's going to take a little bit of time. One of the things that we need to do that is involved in that is there's a lot of the Department of Education approval of the school site that needs to be updated. So all of the big stack of things that we'd put together back in 2003, 2004 need to be updated. We need to take a look at, once we've looked at the conceptual layout of the site and what is there, we need to revisit the environmental impacts of that as far as issues like traffic. We'd agreed to mitigate the traffic impact of the high school by doing all of the full improvements on Bruce Road. That really doesn't work if we're doing part of it, so we need to develop some alternative solutions. We've been thinking about that process, this preliminary stuff taking a while to get started up into the spring or summer, but it's going to take probably a year and a half, 2.5 years to get to the point of having documents that you could go out and do a set of plans to. So as far as occupying a site, we would be looking at 2.5 to 3 years down the road with all of the pieces that need to be put in place. Right now I'm working on developing a critical path schedule that gets pretty detailed on all of the items that we need to do first. But that's going to involve, as Kevin stated, not only the CDE, but we'll have DTSC, have to do a phase 1 environmental on that portion of the site. Do a lot of the things that work with the city of Chico on off-site improvements to make sure that they're appropriately sized. Work with the Inspire group, making sure that we're getting all of their needs incorporated into this move and figuring out what, some of the information that's going to be coming up yet this month is the outcome of their Prop 51 application, and there's CTE applications that are in there. So there's quite a few moving pieces that we're looking at putting all together.
Yeah, I'm done.
I think that
Thank
meant
you.
a long time. You asked how many years, and
It's 2.5 to 3.5 years.
Okay.
So
before
my-
we would be able to open a building on this.
Right. So my comment or question, or maybe line of query, I know we've experienced from the public at times frustration about, well, I voted back in, 2007 or something, for the bond to build the third high school, and we never built it. And in truth, at the time, nobody knew how complicated the environmental mitigations would be on this piece of land. We literally just finished it,
Last year.
No, I think it was this summer.
Was it this year?
Yeah, yeah. So in that sense, if it's from that perspective, this is a really short time. But it's kind of daunting that we would then have to go and update these plans, as you mentioned. However, I would assume no matter what we did with Canyon View, we would have to start here.
Absolutely.
Okay, so this is not wasted effort or money, because in some contexts, you know, if we were to end up changing what we thought we were going to do, we would have still gone through most of this process.
Right now, with the just the CDE approval of the site for a school site, they're good for 5 years. So we would have to redo all of that, bringing it all to the current requirements to get the approval in place. And some of those things that have changed, the phase 1 environmental work, because of the work that facilities got done through the summer, going out there and looking at all of the toxic impacts, you know, that's should be pretty much a very straightforward process. It still needs to be updated and done. So all of these are steps that you would be taking if you were going to be putting the full comprehensive high school in place, or if you were going to be taking a look at how you can utilize a portion of the site to meet the needs.
I know that you just really intrigued Danny, and she's going to make sure she got all those details down. Thank you.
Well, I think one of the important things is that what we're asking for is the ability to develop all of those details and flesh out all of those details and come up with what that schedule should be, and continue to come back and say, okay, this is what we found, this is where we're at. But we didn't want to be having that conversation all behind closed doors or anything. We need to be very transparent to keep this moving ahead. We'll be talking with a lot of different people within the community to do that.
Okay, I move 11.2.5.
Second, any other discussion, Linda?
Yes, I actually have some comments that I'd like to bring forth, because, you know, I believe in Inspire. I feel that the educational model that they offer is unique, and it's proven to be of great benefit to the students in our community. I agree that Inspire really needs their own campus to be able to firmly establish their identity and to fulfill the vision of their charter. Furthermore, I agree that Chico High needs the space on their campus for all the reasons you just brought up, especially with their new sports field now. I mean, the campus will grow. So with all that being said, however, I do have 3 areas of concern, or maybe food for thought, that I'd like to put out to my colleagues. And the first one is equity. So if we are going to do this for Inspire, from a global perspective, why are we doing it for Inspire but not any of the other charter schools?
Charter high school.
Well, charter, Kathy mentioned a high school because of those Measure A dollars used to purchase that land, but there's actually 2 charter high schools now in Chico, aside from Inspire. So it's a matter of equity, and I'm just throwing that out there. Secondly, I just wonder about setting precedent. If we do this once, will we have to chop off another little piece to do it a second time? So, you know, I have a bit of a concern about that. And then the third concern I have is really, what is the cost to the district to do this investigation? That wasn't here in our lead sheet, and is it $5,000, $50,000, more than that? And will that cost be borne by the district alone or by the charter school? And so, you know, I have some questions about that. So I wanted to put that out for my colleagues to think about.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to hear the answer to the who's paying the bill.
Actually, I'm glad you asked the question, because I think that needs to be part of this investigation. So before we start spending a lot of money and go too far down, you know, whether we're spending it or they are, we need to flesh that out ultimately before we bring back an actual request for approval to do this. So there is going to be kind of the chicken and the egg type of thing, is how do we know? But we do a good job cost estimating. So I think part of our plan would be to talk to the group, get an assessment of whether this is even viable, and actually come up with some estimated budgets and projections of what we think the costs are going to be. Because I'm very fully aware, Measure K, we want to be very, we want to uphold our promise to the bondholders. And, you know, that was to do phase 3 and 4 of the facility master plan. So if we're going to do this project and spend these dollars, we also then have to, if we're going to spend any Measure K dollars, I think that needs to come back to the board for a public vetting as well. So I think what we really need to do is ultimately provide a projection of cost and who's paying what, and from this perspective, if any. So I think that's my answer to the cost piece. It makes sense. It needs to be part of that kind of investigation. Before we get into too far, even in the testing and details, we need to come back to you and say, this is viable. We think this is a good option. Here's what we think the real budgets look like. Would you give us an approval to actually move Inspire? So that's
I feel better about that now.
I will comment on the equity piece as well. What we're finding with Measure K, because remember, we've carved off 15.34%. That was the promise also we made to our taxpayers. Many of the charters may want to buy property. And again, the district is the fiduciary position. So we have to buy the property and we would own it. And that is similar to what we have with Chico Country Day. And so what we're hearing even within the charter committee for facilities is this idea of the district buying property. And that is something we would bring to you for your approval, but it is an idea that other charters have. And I think if it makes sense, it fits within our model of what we've done previously and what we talk about doing here.
But the other charters would have to use their Measure K money to buy their property, which is different than this proposal I'm hearing now.
The only thing I would change in what we've learned through this process is ultimately, because the bond dollars are with Chico Unified, that ultimately we are the ones who hold the dollars and we pay them. So we're the ones who actually buy the property on their behalf.
I see.
And we're finding that out. It's not like we take bond dollars and then give them to the charter schools for them to do a real estate deal. Ultimately, we're the ones who have to make that purchase on their behalf and within their allocated monies. So it is more similar to us owning property in other areas.
Okay. All right, so I believe we have a motion and a second on the floor for this. So our approval is just to investigate, no money spent, just investigate the option.
Correct.
And by the heads in the back, I see that you're saying, yeah, let's investigate. Okay.
So Kevin, there will be no money spent in this investigation? Is that what I just heard you say?
We already allocated money to both investigate.
But those are Inspire's dollars that the board approved for them to do that work. So we want to work with Inspire to see if they'd be willing to use those dollars to look at that. That's okay, yeah. Yeah, that was our understanding. Mm-hmm.
I'm just a little confused on our motion here. It's just to continue to do what we've already allocated Inspire money to do. to investigate and come up with a plan.
So when you approved Inspire's dollars, they have an interest of putting some additional space on the current Chico High campus. The conversation ultimately will have to, if this is approved by the board, go back to them and say, okay, so do you use those dollars to then look at what options you have out at the Canyon View property? So it's really up to them to decide, are they going to try and allocate it within the Chico High footprint in the short term, or do they allocate more of those dollars out to Canyon View in the long term?
Yeah, I would just chime in that the likely situation is the dollars that they've already been allocated of their Measure K allotment would kind of be split in different directions. They still have needs at Chico High School, and their career tech application that they've applied for could supplement that, and then the remaining dollars would go this direction.
Okay, so they need this to go forward.
Yes.
Yes.
All right, motion's been made and second. Any discussion from the audience? I see none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I'm going to abstain from this. So I'm going to abstain from this vote because I do still feel that we may be setting precedent, and I still have a concern about the equity, so I will just abstain.
That would be a no vote then, right? Okay.
Passes 3-1. Okay, any items from the floor? I see none. Any other announcements?
I do have an announcement.
Okay.
Again, it goes with Inspire. I'd like the board to consider.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
That's okay. I'd like the board to consider putting on our next agenda a discussion about whether or not the Chico Unified School District still needs to have a liaison on their board as a sitting board member. The other charters in Chico do not have that. It is written into their charter, their new charter for this next 5-year cycle, that they have a Chico Unified member on their board. But I don't know that it's necessary. I don't know if Inspire actually wants us there. And I just think we should bring it up for discussion to be consistent with the other charter schools. So I'd like to know if we can agendize that.
Is that okay, staff?
Yes, when we set the agenda, we absolutely can add that to our January board agenda for discussion.
Great, thank you.
Okay. And Eileen, that last vote of hers was a no.
It was an abstain.
Well, then the superintendent said then that's a no vote.
An abstention is a no, it doesn't.
Yeah, I think just for clarification, I think the reason given would be a no vote, not an abstention.
Yeah. Yeah, as long as it's recorded as a no vote, thank you.
Meeting adjourned.
I was gonna
Oh,
ask.
I'm sorry. Did you have an announcement?
Yeah, what are all you young women out there doing with your night?
They're listening to us.